I think it could be said in one word, Dennis: potential. I believe that SAT7 is just a powerful ministry. It provides Bible-based programming. It makes the gospel available to millions and millions of people in the Middle East and North Africa. That kind of potential is something that I believe is exciting to be a part of.
Welcome to the Unconventional Ministry Podcast. I'm Dennis Weens, your host with SAT7 USA. Each week, I invite a guest to the podcast for a conversation about their fresh ministry idea and their innovative approach. As you listen, let us know how it helps you. Give us a like and be sure to share it with your friends. Again, if you've heard of a fresh idea in ministry, let me know. I'd like to welcome them onto the podcast to explain. My guest today is the Vice President for Marketing and Communication at SAT7 USA, Joe Willey. Welcome to the Unconventional Ministry Podcast.
Thanks, Dennis. I'm happy to be here.
It's great to have you with us, and you're part of the communications team, not only in the U.S., but international and our different support offices across the many channels of SAT7. You're reading a lot of stories of viewers who are writing in, and so I want to start by asking you, what excites you most about SAT7?
I think it could be said in one word, Dennis: potential. I believe that SAT7 is just a powerful ministry. It provides Bible-based programming. It makes the gospel available to millions and millions of people in the Middle East and North Africa. That kind of potential is something that I believe is exciting to be a part of. And we don't only make the gospel available, but we support the church, the growing church in that region. And what that means in a practical sense is that we support isolated believers. We support those courageous Christians who in many cases are becoming and have become and are continuing to walk with Christ at a loss of family, a loss of friends, a loss of opportunity, and in some cases, it may be a loss of their freedom or even their life. And I think that SAT7, in helping support and in helping disciple, is making, again, that impact that is so important and that really we are commanded to do by Christ. And another thing that is, I truly think, really interesting about multimedia broadcaster like SAT7 is that we have satellite broadcast, we have Facebook programming, video on demand. Those types of programs and the way they're delivered go beyond borders. They don't stop at a national line of demarcation. They reach people over mountains, around mountains, overseas. It is important that people hear the word of God and the gospel, and SAT7 in its creative ways and the ways it broadcasts is making that possible.
You talk about the potential, think about how we cross boundaries and borders with the satellite broadcast and with the digital. In that potential, it's also the potential to build relationships with the viewing audience. And through social media platforms, you can interact, you can pray together, you can worship together. And so when you talk about a potential, this is really enormous in terms of the Great Commission, in terms of helping strengthen the church that's across the Middle East and North Africa.
Absolutely. And I think that we all have seen, no matter what country you reside, you have seen an explosion of digital media. And that is another opportunity that SAT7 is taking advantage of with SAT7 Plus, video on demand, Facebook, Instagram, social media. And SAT7 uses those platforms to be able to interact with those viewers. That is something that I think is also unheard of. And many people may think that SAT7 is a ministry that just broadcasts something and we have no idea about the relationships that we're building or the stories that people have, how they've been impacted. But that's not true. SAT7 has a great deal of information back from viewers, stories back from viewers. We can see when they have been helped. We can see what programs they're saying, hey, I really appreciate this program. It really helped me. So I think those stories are a crucial aspect. And it's one that this ministry, SAT7, I know is probably most encouraging to us because we get real input from viewers.
And part of your work is to take those stories from the viewers and what's happening in Sat7 across the Middle East and North Africa, to take those stories and you communicate those stories to the friends of the ministry across the United States.
Yes, I think it may be my favorite part of my job. We have a repository of viewer comments and viewer stories, and I spend as much time there as I can because you really do get a flavor and a feel for how people are being impacted by the ministry. So those stories also make it into our content that we share with ministry partners and others who are interested in Sat7. Some of the stories, are really, I think, as encouraging for us as a person may have been encouraged, but there are stories that sometimes are harrowing about the situations that someone has gone through and they have needed support. There has been physical danger, there has been hunger, there has been poverty, and they are asking for people to pray. That affects you in a deep way.
So are you putting out like a story a week, or are you telling multiple stories? Should they get on an email list, or should they go to our Facebook and Instagram? Where can people read these stories that you're sharing with people?
Well, it's easy to do. So you could go to sat7usa.org. And if you're just on the homepage, you can also look at the top. It will say news and stories. And we post these stories there. I think this says it all, stories on how your gifts are changing lives. And so our ministry partners are being told and being shown how their support is making that impact. If you go to the website, you also, at the bottom of the homepage, it will say never miss the good news. And you can sign up and receive those stories directly in your inbox. We do send an email each week that tells people that are on that list exactly what's happening with people in the Middle East and North Africa and how God is using Sat7 and their support to make an impact. And we also share those on our social media. So whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn, we have links to those stories, as well as often prayer requests, quotes from people in the Middle East and North Africa who have been impacted by Sat7. So there is longer and shorter pieces of content that is to raise awareness of how the Middle East and North Africa is benefiting from the work God is doing with Sat7.
And I would encourage our listeners, when you read that story, it might be of an 18-year-old who's come to Christ in Syria. But when you read that story, pray for him or that person. But there's a whole generation of 18-year-olds across the Middle East who are isolated in their faith, sometimes even isolated within their family, and just pray for that whole generation. And then, of course, he's been watching a live program on Sat7. Pray for that program host as they communicate the truth of the gospel and how people are going to grasp that, and the Holy Spirit's going to work with His Word as it reaches people across the Middle East and North Africa. So really begin to pray for those stories, pray through those stories, and that'd be a great way to help the ministry of Sat7. I know there's different ways that people can get involved, Joe, and one that you promote a lot is Sponsor a Day. Tell us about that amazing opportunity of Sponsor a Day, a broadcast cost. For a few $100s, you can impact hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of homes with that broadcast. So tell us a little bit about that Sponsor a Day program you have.
Yes, as you had said earlier, Dennis, that one of the attributes of Sat7 is its cost effectiveness. Well, Sponsor a Day really is an opportunity, and when you do learn how little it truly does to make an impact in broadcasting cost in the Middle East and North Africa via Sat7, it's a pretty exciting opportunity because Sponsor a Day means that for $670, an organization, a church, an individual could provide a full day of Christian broadcast costs in Farsi on Sat7 Pars. And Farsi is a language spoken in Iran. It's also spoken in Afghanistan. And then you could also sponsor a day of Sat7 Kids, which is an Arabic speaking channel. So you have two languages, large languages in the region that can be sponsored an entire day, 24 hours of broadcasting for $670. Now, this is really pretty incredible because, as I had said a little earlier, it works out about 97% of the population in the Middle East and North Africa, or the MENA region, as we call it, are non-Christians. So you're sponsoring a day of broadcasts that are reaching potentially untold millions of people that could tune in and say, I have heard about Jesus Christ. I have seen kids programs that have benefited my family because of the values it has taught to my children. And it really is, again, an example, as you had said, Dennis, of cost effectiveness and how Sat7 broadcast really and truly doesn't cost much to make such a great impact. And I think that works out to, if you were to do that and say, I'm going to sponsor one day a year, I think that works out to about $56 per month. So you really can see how effective just a few dollars a month can be.
I know we had one church sponsor one day each month. And so that'd be another way to think about that. But it's really a great opportunity because, if you think about some of these places where you would have difficulty even traveling to, let alone the cost and all the regulations, it'd be difficult for an American maybe to even travel to Iran. Yet by sponsoring a day of broadcast costs on the Farsi channel for $670, you can make the gospel potentially available to anybody in Iran that would actually search channels and click on the Sat7 Pars channel. And you don't have to get shots. You don't have to go to the airport. You don't have to wait in lines. $670 is an incredible ministry opportunity that will impact lives in some way because the Holy Spirit will take his word and work with it in people's lives. So, Joe, again, a great opportunity. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to our website and search for the sponsor tab that says ways to be involved. And one of the ways is to sponsor a day, and there's a tab for that there on the Sat7 USA website. And let me give you that website, Sat7, that's SAT, the number 7, USA.org. And then just search for Sat7 USA in Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and some of the others, and you can read the stories and become more involved in the ministry. So, Joe, talk to us a little bit more about some other ways that people could come alongside what we are doing to help see a growing church across the Middle East and North Africa.
I think often if someone may be listening to this and think, well, if I don't have financial resources, then I can't play a role in the mission of Sat7 and what God is doing. But that's not true. And I think one of the things that really truly needs to be said, and we all do need to understand, is that prayer should go before us. And we have an opportunity to join the prayer team. And so on our site, if you go to Get Involved, there's a tab, Get Involved. There are opportunities. And the very first one is join the prayer team, because we know, and we've seen this, it's a biblical principle, so we know it is true, and that is that prayer changes things. So if we are not praying, I think we're missing part of the equation, because we could broadcast and broadcast and broadcast. But what we are praying is that God is the one who is moving on the hearts of people in the Middle East and North Africa, because they are made in his image. He cares for them. He is making the gospel available specifically to their ears. And so we want to pray to make sure that we are truly seeking God and saying, Lord, how do we move forward? What do we do? And we would truly invite you who is listening to really play a part in that. We have a monthly prayer calendar that you can download and you can print. You can use that as a prayer guide. You can share that with your church, share that with a group. Maybe you have a Bible study, or maybe you just have a group of friends that every once in a while you get together and you'd say, hey, let's take a little bit of time praying. I think that's such a crucial part. There are also opportunities to volunteer, and perhaps you have a gifting and you say, look, God has gifted me this way, and I'd like to help Sat7. What can I do? Well, contact us. We'd like to hear from you. So there are so many various ways. Again, you can go to the site and see, but you might say, I'm going to share Sat7 programming with people in my neighborhood. And remember, we have viewers in the U.S. who are native Arabic speakers, native Turk speakers, native Farsi speakers who are in the U.S. who do watch Sat7. It is available. You can watch it online. You can go to Sat7 Plus, which is our on-demand provider, and you can watch in these languages. So perhaps you know someone who is a speaker that you may say, this will be maybe interesting to you. God, as we were just talking about, God moves beyond borders. He will certainly move beyond the borders of the United States and to reach people's hearts. So I think this opportunity to be involved in Sat7 is really multifaceted, and it's exciting because we're not just a ministry that says you have to do one thing. We're inviting you to take part with what God is doing in the Middle East and North Africa right where you are, because we know that we can go, our broadcast can go where you may not be able to go.
So I would encourage you to go to the App Store and look for the Sat7 app. It's called SAT number 7 PLUS, Sat7 Plus. And on that app, it's free download, and you can get it on Apple devices or Android. And then I use it all the time when I meet an Arabic speaker or Farsi speaker, Dari speaker, or a Turkish speaker. Open the app, go to that channel, listen to a live broadcast, and then ask them what's being said, and they can tell you. And it's a great conversational starter. So we encourage you to get on the app as well as get on our website. And a lot of our people, Joe, are listening to secular news. It's filled with news from these countries like Iran and Afghanistan and Egypt and Algeria and the Gulf countries. And we tend to buy into secular news, and we forget that the hope of the gospel crosses borders. I'd encourage people to get on the email or the social media and read some of these amazing stories of how incredibly bold the church is across the Middle East and North Africa.
Agreed. I like to tell people if God could reach me, he can reach the entire Middle East and North Africa. And I think that when we all pause and search our hearts, we really do get excited because God doesn't care how far something is. I think about the parable when Christ tells it, and it's like there's a shepherd, there are 100 sheep, and 99 are safe, and he goes and he gets that one. I sometimes think about what's the value of a soul in the Middle East and North Africa. I mean, we're talking about $670. Is that it? Is it $671? Is it $10,000? Is it, if we're praying, is it 10 prayers and then I give up, or 20 prayers? And I think that is something that Sat7, again, would invite you to do, is say, wait a second, we are reaching people who are loved by God. And that should, as Christians, excite us. Maybe God is, I would ask, maybe God is calling you as you listen to say, I really need to consider people in the Middle East and North Africa and consider that they deserve to hear the gospel. And the believers who are isolated, they deserve to be in a community of some sort with other believers who are just supporting them, just praying, just letting them know they are not alone.
Well, thank you, Joe, for coming on the Unconventional Ministry podcast and talking about communications here in Sat7 USA and what the ministry is doing across the Middle East and North Africa to see a growing church that's confident in its faith and its witness, but also a church that's contributing to its culture and to its society. And so there's a lot of stories to tell. And we encourage people to visit the website, that's SAT number 7 USA.org, as well as get on our social media and learn more about what God is doing to build his church across the Middle East and North Africa. So thank you, Joe, for joining us today on the Unconventional Ministry podcast.
Thank you, Dennis, for having me. I really appreciate it.
In our changing world, there are more ways than ever to do ministry. Sat7 as a broadcast media ministry is changing how ministry is done. Through innovative approaches, collaborative efforts, broadcast satellite television, web streaming, and social media, Sat7 is making a difference. Visit Sat7 online today at sat7usa.org to learn ways you can be a part of this kingdom work. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your friends. If you know of an unconventional ministry approach, please introduce us. We'd like to have them on as guests. Thank you again for joining this episode of the Unconventional Ministry Podcast.